Sammy Gravano would be done with his testimony soon. Indeed, this would be the rat's last day on the witness stand, probably the last time he will ever see John Gotti in person. And once again today, he helped the prosecution dig a hole for his old friend, a hole which seems only now to get deeper. Prosecutor Gleason pointing at Gotti. From time to time, did John Gotti talk to you about people he thought should die? Gravano, yes. And from time to time, did he have them killed? Gravano, yes. And indeed, on yet another secretly recorded audio tape, there was John Gotti today, again talking about not one but two murders.
The liaison guy's getting whacked because that don't belong to us. That's their and he's got to get whacked because he's getting for the same reason that Jelly Belly's getting. You want to challenge the administration? You will meet the challenge, and you're going.
The words whacked and going, according to Gravano, are just synonyms for murder. Defense has tried to paint Gravano as a would-be tough guy, but someone who in fact feared jail so completely that before he turned government witness, he tried to escape from the Metropolitan Correctional Center. And maybe he hated it enough to lie about John Gotti. Question from defense attorney Cardinale. You disliked jail so much you thought about planning an escape. Answer, things like that were discussed, Gravano said. And you took steps toward escape. Answer, yes. Of Gravano's vast wealth, he says he lost a lot of it when he turned government witness. Quote, I have parlayed it into a tremendous shylocking or loan sharking business, Gravano says, which I lost when I became a government witness. Now, Gravano says he has about $250,000 in cash and about $750,000 in real estate money and real estate that will still be his when he gets out of jail, whenever that is. Had he been convicted rather than pleading guilty, he would never have gotten out of jail. He'd have gotten a life sentence without parole. Instead, he will be out in at most 20 years. Reporting live from Brooklyn, Jim Dolan, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
For years, federal agents watched and documented the actions of Sammy the Bull Gravano and his friend John Gotti, and then they turned Gravano.
The infrastructure of the mob is disintegrating. It is breaking down for sociological reasons and because of law enforcement efforts.
In 3 days of testimony, Gravano, the highest-ranking witness ever to testify against the mob, said he had helped kill 19 people, 10 of them hits or whack-outs approved by John Gotti. Gravano also detailed alleged kickbacks Gotti received from the garment, sanitation, shipping, and oil and gas businesses. But the most chilling testimony came when Gravano described the murders of Big Paul Castellano, godfather of the Gambino family, and his bodyguard Thomas Bellotti. Gravano said Gotti planned the murders and was half a block away when they took place outside Sparks Steakhouse in Manhattan. The shooters ran over to them and started shooting them, he said. Then he and Mr. Gotti drove slowly past the bullet-riddled bodies. Prosecutors say drugs were at the heart of Gotti's dispute with Castellano. Castellano had imposed a ban with a penalty of death on drug dealing, which some of Gotti's associates had reportedly violated. And that, say prosecutors, was part of the unraveling of New York's most powerful crime family. Just as John Gotti has been a symbol of the mob's power, he may now represent its decline. Law enforcement officials say that for the first time in years, thanks to a record number of informants, surveillance tapes, and strong racketeering laws, the Mafia as we know it is in utter disarray. Karen Burns, ABC News, New York.
The lone witness for the defense was not, frankly, the sort of guy whose hands you'd want your fate to rest in, if you had a choice.
I'm not perfect. What do you want me to say? I'm not perfect.
But in fact, tax lawyer Murray Appleman was the sole witness for the defense, telling the jury he advised John Gotti not to file tax returns because the returns could be used against him in court. But Gotti stopped filing in 1984, and Appleman didn't meet Gotti until 1986. Question. Did you advise Mr. Gotti before April 15, 1985 not to file tax returns for 1984? Answer, I would imagine no. Though Gotti never filed returns, he did twice send $5,000 checks to the IRS based on Appleman's advice. Question, how'd you come up with that $5,000 figure to pay the IRS? Answer from this professional tax lawyer, I took it out of the air. You're a professional tax advisor and you took a figure out of the air? Answer, yes. Well, the defense did want to put on other witnesses, a hypnotist to talk about how afraid of jail Sam Gravano was before his arrest, and an audio expert to discuss the secretly recorded audio tapes, but they were prevented by the judge, who ruled the jury should not hear that evidence.
Notwithstanding the fact that the playing field has been made uneven by the prosecution team, I feel great about the case, and he feels great about the case.
Free God! Free God!
A group of protesters picketed today, unenthusiastically, to free John Gotti. They did not deny they were paid for their staged protest. But the real theater was inside. U.S. Attorney Andrew Maloney, who has barely said a word in this trial since opening statements, did not examine or cross-examine a single witness, spoke for less than 15 minutes today, and almost threw the case into a mistrial. First, Maloney, referring to a chart of the Gambino family hierarchy, told the jury that mob turncoat Sammy the Bull Gravano would, in future trials, quote, testify against this whole chart. That brought an objection from the defense, which the judge sustained. Then Maloney talked about the secretly recorded audio tapes. Quote, with the words that came out of his own mouth, he brought down his whole family, Maloney said. Another objection, because the jury will decide just who's brought down here. Again, the judge sustained the objections. And finally, there was this, which brought loud, angry objections from all three defense lawyers and a call for a mistrial. Quote, if you accept that this is the boss and underboss of a murderous, treacherous crime family, Maloney said, pointing to Locascio and Gotti, then pointing to the jury, you would be less than human if you didn't feel some personal concern. With that, the courtroom erupted with objections, again sustained. With the jury now out of the courtroom, Maloney said he thought his statement was fair and appropriate.
It was just an attempt to beg for a conviction, despite what happened in the courtroom, or despite the lack of evidence.
Would the Maloney statement be used in an appeal should there be a conviction?
I think it certainly would be.
Motions for a mistrial in the case were turned down, but the judge will instruct the jury tomorrow to disregard the Maloney statements. Tomorrow, the judge will instruct the jury as to the law regarding each of the charges on the indictment, and then the jury will retire to deliberate, to decide the fate, for the fourth time in 6 years, of John Gotti. In Brooklyn, Jim Dolan, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Boss of the Gambino crime family. The stunning verdict put him away for life. It came after only 2 days of jury deliberations at federal court in Brooklyn. Jim Dolan is there live. Jim?
Well, Greg, no question about it. Stunning is the word. After 39 days of testimony from 40 witnesses, there were more courtroom exhibits than anybody here could count. The jury took just 14 hours to say the words that will put John Gotti, perhaps the nation's most notorious criminal, the boss, the feared and revered boss of the nation's most powerful crime family, away for the rest of his life. Guilty, the jury said 10 times. Guilty of everything the prosecution charged. The feds wasted no time in taking their bows.
It's been a long road. Justice has been served, and it feels awfully good.
The Teflon is gone. The Don is covered with Velcro, and every charge in the indictment stuck.
And as the prosecution took bows, the defense bowed their heads and vowed an appeal.
Obviously, this verdict is not an analytical verdict. This is a verdict which is fundamentally an emotional verdict.
In the courtroom, as the verdict was read by the forewoman, Gotti's reaction was barely noticeable. He smiled, mumbled some, and accepted the verdict that will put him behind bars for the rest of his life. Murder of Paul Castellano, guilty. Murder of Robert DiBernardo, guilty. Murder of Louis Melito, guilty. Murder of Louis DeBono, guilty. Act after act, count after count, proven beyond a reasonable doubt. A 13-count indictment with 43 separate criminal acts alleged against Gotti, all proven convincingly enough that it took the jury just 14 hours to reach a verdict.
We were hurt and stunned by the verdict, and our support came from John Gotti and Frank Locascio, each of whom, in relative selflessness and admirable selflessness, sought to give us consolation.
And the importance of the moment was lost by no one on the side of the prosecution.
If John Gotti was acquitted, I thought it would give a shot in the arm to organized crime throughout the United States, and John Gotti would achieve a status that not even Al Capone or others in the past have achieved. I was convinced if John Gotti was convicted, it would be the death knell for organized crime, traditional organized crime as we know it in the United States.
Paul Castellano lay on the 46th Street pavement in a pool of blood and a pile of unanswered questions. It was December 16th, 1985, and police say John Gotti would climb over Castellano's body and by the middle of the next week, ascend the throne of the nation's most powerful crime family. At this meeting of Gambino family capos, it would become official. John Gotti was the boss of bosses. Before the meeting, Gotti was overheard saying of his capos, "They must come to me." Skip forward now to December of 1990, and Gotti is arrested with his consigliere, Frank Locascio, and his underboss, wise guy Sammy the Bull Gravano.
These guys were under arrest. I got them.
All three were charged with several murders, including Castellanos, plus racketeering, loan sharking, gambling, and tax evasion. But only two would stand trial. In a startling turn that would rattle the rafters of the underworld, Gravano, Gotti's most trusted aide and closest friend, would turn state's evidence, plead guilty to 19 murders, and tell the world about his longtime partner in crime, John Gotti. Gravano, John was the boss, I was the underboss, and Frank Locascio, was the acting consigliere. Gravano said. Of the Castellano murder, Gravano said Gotti and others planned it and decided who would be the shooters. Gotti and Gravano would be backup shooters, he said. Quote, "Me and John went on the other side of 3rd Avenue in case they got away and started running on 46th Street. As fascinating as this face-to-face, ego-to-ego confrontation was, as much tension as it added to the courtroom as the two stared at each other from across the room, the most convincing witness against John Gotti clearly was John Gotti. Through the use of secretly recorded audio tapes, Gotti may well have prepared his own prison cell. Murder, gambling, obstruction of justice, Gotti talked freely about it all on the tapes. In all, there were 29 days of testimony, only 2 of which were taken up by the defense. They called just a single witness, a suspicious tax lawyer who testified that he advised Gotti not to file tax returns because the returns could be used against him in court.
Now, we talked about Gravano there for a couple of moments. Maloney said today that despite his murders, despite his lifetime of violence and crime, one thing is clear from this trial: this jury believed Sam Gravano. We haven't yet mentioned Gotti co-defendant Frank Locascio. You could go days during this trial without anybody mentioning Locascio, but the jury did find Locascio guilty of everything he was charged with one exception. He was found not guilty of one gambling count. Sentencing for both will be June 23rd, but believe me, it will be an anticlimax. Both defendants here will spend the rest of their lives in jail. The only chance they ever have of getting out of jail is if there is a successful appeal in this case. Reporting live from Brooklyn, Jim Dolan, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
Reaction to the verdict is coming in from many quarters, including one of Gotti's favorite hangout spots, the Bergen Hunt and Fish Club in Ozone Park. That is where Celeste Ford is standing by live for us. Celeste.
Roz, the guilty verdict has sent shockwaves through John Gotti's home turf in Howard Beach and here in Ozone Park. Many residents regard the reputed mob boss as a folk hero, and some can't believe the murder conviction will stick to the so-called Teflon Don. The Bergen Hunt and Fish Club in Ozone Park, a Gotti hangout and, according to federal surveillance tapes, the seat of the Gambino crime family. Today, patrons refused to comment on the downfall of the reputed Don, and residents were suitably cautious. Who was found guilty?
We don't know anything, Annie.
Are you surprised by the verdict?
I don't know nothing.
From the club's back room, wiretaps caught Gotti making brutal life and death decisions. But many in the neighborhood overlook his notorious reputation, and although Gotti is now a convicted killer, they still afford him the respect that comes with power.
In my eyes, he does no wrong. Unfortunately, the jury thought otherwise. He's innocent.
How can you be so certain when a jury said otherwise?
I don't know, because he's innocent. That's it.
Here, Gotti is beloved for his 4th of July fireworks display and block party. He blatantly broke the law, and year after year, police look the other way.
He helps the kids out on 4th of July, buys them things. He does a lot for the community. Again, there's a number of things, but I don't want to go into it right now.
Even if he's a convicted killer?
He's not a killer.
47-year-old Gotti lived in this house on 85th Street in Howard Beach until his arrest more than a year ago. Today, neighbors were reluctant to talk about the guilty verdict. Are you surprised? This man voiced an opinion seldom heard around here.
Glad.
Why?
All of the stuff that happened. It's just ridiculous, you know? Just got to come to an end.
When leaving her father's home this afternoon, Victoria Gotti reportedly told the press the government did not play fair and square, adding John Gotti did not have a chance from the beginning. Then Victoria Gotti reportedly described her father as the last of the Mohicans. And we're live in Ozone Park. I'm Celeste Ford, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.
A little short
Huh? Yeah.
Hey, good. Shoot the video you've been around here. There with the video look.
You still think? He turned, he looked around.
This guy anybody?
Yeah, John Mitchell.
Morning. Any surprises on the tapes the jury chose to listen to?
No, no surprise. Nothing at all.
Watch this on. Yeah.
Wait, stop. Don't worry. Tracy! Stay there. No, that's not him. It's not him.
Roll on these guys.
You weren't standing there. Do you have any reaction?
Judge the jury to all prints, everyone on their rights. Don't bother me no more. Go away.
I got it.
His hair right there.
God's chosen crew.
Now you take point.
Wayne, just help him.
Here he comes.
Heads up, everybody down.
Down. Close, let's clear a path. Coming over.
Come on. Over here. Hey. Joe, get him.
I'm just going to bring him to his mic. Here they come.
Harry, please get him over here.
Harry, get him over here. Harry, get him. We're getting him. We're getting him. What? Over here.
I know. I won't put it there. Get over there. Over there.
Hey, out. Get out.
Get over there. Get over there.
Just I'll line him up.
Hey, down. Okay. All right. So I'm.
Come on, Robin. Come on. Council.
Hey, I hope they're rolling back there.
Is everybody ready?
Yeah. Move over to the microphone more. Make sure they're rolling in the right room. Why am I going to have that? Yeah. Gotta get down there still.
Extreme disappointment. A growing respect for my client, who has conducted himself on receiving this rather shocking news who has conducted himself upon receiving this kind of shocking news with enormous dignity and
With courage. He took it like a real man. And he has vowed that the fight is not over, ladies and gentlemen. It's not. I want to.
Well, are you disappointed, Mr. Krieger, that the jury was not out very long? Does that suggest to you that they just didn't buy the defense argument?
Well, I guess one must conclude that, of course. But you're talking about matters which are extremely personal. What difference does it make to us whether the jury is 1 hour or 1 week or 1 month if the verdict is a bad one? And we feel that this verdict was a bad one, Charles, and that it, unfortunately, in our opinion, and I think I say this on behalf of the three of us, that the jury did not give adequate consideration to the defense arguments, did not give, more than that, adequate consideration to the evidence and to the applicable law.
Do you feel you had grounds for appeal? What grounds are you planning to appeal? Do you feel like the judge allowed you to
There are many grounds that we're planning to appeal. Now, without cataloging them, I can tell you this, that we are all confident, as John Mitchell said, that when it became clear to us that if the jury was coming in this quick, it was probably not good news. What John told us all and Frank told us all was not, they were consoling us, as opposed to feeling sorry for themselves, saying that this fight will continue and eventually we'll win it. We believe there are sufficient reasons to overturn this conviction.
I'm not going to detail at this point the various grounds on which an appeal will be based any more than I will detail the grounds that we will include in our Rule 29C, which will be filed within 30 days from now. But we are dissatisfied to our bones with the verdict, and we will not hesitate to pursue every remedy available to us.
Well, there are a number of things that we wish that the jury had been aware of, and perhaps the visceral reaction that led to this conviction would have been different had we been able to present what we believe to be appropriate evidence that would have had significant impact on some key portions of the government's case, including particularly the credibility of Gravano, including particularly the credibility and accuracy, if you will, of the government's tapes and transcripts, and including particularly, probably most particularly, the credibility of Sammy Gravano.
Mr. Cardinale, Mr. Krieger said that he spoke for all three of you, and he said that he didn't think the jury gave enough time
deliberation of the evidence, but doesn't it fly in the face of the fact that with regards to your client, Mr. Ocasio, they were very specific in finding him not guilty of one count?
Well, that's the part that we can't understand because it really doesn't make sense. In the course of the RICO conviction, what they did was they found him guilty of that as a predicate act in the RICO and then somehow found him not guilty on the substantive count. It's inconsistent, but it demonstrates to us the fact that they really didn't, unfortunately, give it enough attention or test the case sufficiently. I mean, it just doesn't make sense that they found him not guilty of the substantive count, and they should have.
Mr. Krieger, you said that you were growing respect for your client. The jury just found him guilty of murder.
I don't see where there's anything inconsistent in my respect for him and an unfounded jury verdict.
Mr. Mitchell, can you give us more?
I'm inclined to think that they must have accepted Sam Gravano's testimony. And maybe it's because I'm too objective and analytical in my view of the evidence, and I do not give enough credit to the jury in reaching its verdict based upon a bias or a prejudice or a perception of wrongdoing as opposed to that which was demonstrated in the courtroom. I stand by that which we urged upon the jury. For example, that the description of the Castellano homicide as given by Gravano is a fiction and was disproved time and again during our presentation of the defense. Now, why the jury concluded the way that it did can either be laid on the doorstep of we lawyers and not establishing something in defense, or, and this is the theory to which we subscribe, that the built-in perception of wrongdoing in the way the case was proved by the prosecution leads to such conclusions. We had to seek to fight uphill against uncharged crimes that consisted of a myriad of murders, of which the grand jury did not indict. Number two, jury tampering, which is literally throwing a snake into the jury box. We had to deal with all of the various allegations of Gravano. And I tell you, not one of us as defense lawyers were aware of the scope of Gravano's testimony until a day and a half before he got on the witness stand.
If you want to know really where we're going to go on appeal, following up on what Mr. Krieger said, obviously this verdict is not an analytical verdict. This is a verdict which is fundamentally an emotional verdict. As you pointed out, they even have an inconsistency in the counts, but the jury fundamentally went in there and said guilty or not guilty. What plugs into that kind of an emotional response are all of the problems that Mr. Krieger has brought before you. This was an uphill battle to try and prevent perceptions of wrongdoing in this case. We had to fight constantly against the admission of uncharged crimes. We fought desperately to try and give a view of these defendants that was fair and balanced. We had a difficult time, and sometimes it was impossible to get evidence before the jury, which would show the other side of these people. Now, if the issues that are ultimately going to be raised on appeal, the most forceful ones, are going to deal with the admission of these uncharged crimes, with the ability of the government to be able to try and put evidence before the jury, to make arguments to this jury, to taint their view and prejudice their view against these gentlemen as a whole, to prevent them from doing what was necessary, and that was to analytically look at the government's proof and see whether or not it was there, to overcome the more emotional arguments and to go really to the meat of what was there, or in this case, what wasn't there.
Mr. Mitchell, can you give me more of an idea?
Just to follow up, give me an example of what we're talking about here. I think I couldn't say it any better than John, but let me just say this. At the beginning of this case, Andy Maloney got up and gave an argument to this jury that they should decide the case not based on any emotion, not based on any fear, not based on any prejudice, but on the evidence. At the end of the case, given the production that I suggest went into this to taint the jurors and to make them make a decision not based on any analysis but rather on gut emotion, you saw what this case was all about when Maloney got back up and told this jury, basically, forget about the evidence, forget about analyzing it, Convict because you should be afraid. Convict because you should have prejudice. Convict because these are bad men. Not because we've proven it. And what he did in that type of argument was take away everything we tried to do in the course of the case. That was to have the jurors have enough courage to test the case and to analyze it. Because if they had done that fairly and without prejudice, without fear, they wouldn't have come to these verdicts.
Mr. Krieger, in all the years of you in medicine, have you seen a case quite like this?
No, I have not seen a case quite like this. And that begins with the jury itself, the sequestered anonymous jury. Secondly, with the price paid by the government for Gravano's testimony. I said it in the court, I say it here. Our country is sick to the core if it is willing to pay for testimony by literally absolving a person of 19 confessed murders. You heard the argument that he's going to do 20 years. I warned you. I warned you. I'd like to have as many good years left as the number he will do less than 20 years.
Can you give me more what your client
Oh, absolute control of himself, supportive of each one of us. You have three lawyers here who are relatively passionate people, and we were hurt and stunned by the verdict, and our support came from John Gotti and Frank Licasio, each of whom, in relative selflessness and admirable selflessness, sought to give us consolation.
Absolutely. They were more concerned with consoling us than feeling sorry for themselves. There's never been any of that. They don't see this fight as over. It's not over. We're going to appeal these decisions. We're going to hope to get another opportunity to get before a head of jury and try this case again, and hopefully on a more balanced setting. You can do nothing but praise the amount of pluckiness and the amount of courage and dignity that these defendants had in this defeat.
Do you think the judge generally gave you a fair fight?
We can't comment on the specific activities of court, prosecution, except in the areas in which we have met it on the public record. If we have any complaints about the court's conduct of the trial, well, there are appropriate forum in which we should raise that. And it is quite possible that some of the issues that we will raise at a later time will involve decisions made by Judge Lassie, but we really don't want to go beyond.
Do you think it's the fact that it's not
We believe it.
We believe so. We believe that had we been able to present that type of evidence, the jury would have had a far different view of what this case was all about. We think that we were wronged in our inability to do that. And again, that's what appeals are for. And the one thing I can tell you about these gentlemen, too, is as they consoled us, was that they're realistic enough and experienced enough to know that this fight is, as they said, far from over. That we will continue and we'll be successful at another level.
In many respects, absolutely, unquestionably. And I look forward to the day when we can convince a jury of a wrong was done here.
What is the very next step and when does that happen?
File our motion pursuant to Rule 29. optimistic as to the eventual results of the appeal litigation.
What do you make of this demonstration outside?
Well, I tell you, one of the most interesting things that I have observed during the course of this trial is that I, a relative stranger in New York, I haven't lived here for 21 years, I am greeted on the street. People shout from trucks, from cars. Say hello to John. Give John our best. He is a unique American figure, beloved by many. And I think that the demonstration is a public expression of frustration with all that has led to his conviction.
You just talked with your client. Did he have anything that he said to you that could be passed on to us?
No, we exchanged good wishes, and the only thing that... No, there is really nothing that I could say in regard to that.
What was his point of not saying anything in open court?
Well, all of us feel that enough has been said, and to provide an opportunity for what was just going to degenerate into acrimonious exchanges, which in the last analysis wind up beyond your control. You do not control the courtroom as such. We thought that the best way to proceed was to rest on our record, which we believe to be more than adequate.
To John Gotti himself, traditionally defense lawyers at the sentencing throw themselves on the mercy of the court, beg for mercy. None of that here, beg for leniency?
Well, as you well know, this case is not a traditional case. It was not handled in traditional terms. And Mr. Gotti is far from a traditional person. So therefore, the manner in which we proceeded in sentence, we consider typical for us under these circumstances.
What was the mood of John Gotti after he was sentenced?
Just the same as it was before. Dignified, strong, resolute. I think that's the best word.
Do you think it finally sunk in with him today?
I don't know what you mean.
That life in prison.
You're putting a spin on it, which I do not accept. I don't accept personally, and I do not accept on his behalf.
Okay, thanks.
Free John Gotti!
lawlessness. Is there any other word for it?
You're a U.S. Marshal?
Yeah.
What's your name, by the way?
Tom.
Tom what?
I can't say.
Okay. I mean, right in front of the federal courthouse, smashing your car.
This could be Seoul, Korea, it could be anywhere in the world, but would you believe it happens here in America? A feeding frenzy, that's what it was.
Good afternoon, I'm Jim Fox, Assistant Director of the FBI. We're here today after the sentencing of John Gotti this morning, which most of you covered. I would like to introduce my colleagues, and then I will ask the United States Attorney for the Eastern District to introduce his colleagues. To my immediate left is Bruce Mao, the squad supervisor in the Gotti case, and to his left, Special Agent in Charge Bill Doran, who supervises all criminal investigations in the New York office. Today was just another step in the continuing war on organized crime, a war in which we have had considerable success, we believe. In the last 10 years, we have now locked up 25 mob bosses, 14 underbosses. In the last 2 years alone, we have had more than 1,000 organized crime indictments, more than 800 organized crime convictions. We can investigate a case until we're blue in the face, and it does no good unless that case is properly prosecuted. And this case was prosecuted, I believe, with brilliance under the direction of United States Attorney Andy Maloney.
Thank you, Jim. On my right is Jamie Ornstein, Pat Carter, Laura Ward, and John Gleason. Today's results were the results of an awful lot of people's work, both in the U.S. Attorney's Office for the East District and the FBI, but also our colleagues on this side of the river in Bob Oglethorpe's office and Otto Obermeyer's office. I think the significance of the case is twofold. Number one, to bring down the boss of the most major crime family in the country is, in and of itself, is significant. But I think what is particularly significant is what he'd become in the public's eye. I think that riot in front of the courthouse reflects some of that he'd become bigger than life and appeared to be mocking the system, mocking law enforcement. So I think it was important for law enforcement and for the public to bring this gang leader to justice. In terms of stamping out the Mafia in the city, it's just, as Jed Fox said, just one further step, just as the conviction of the head of the Lucchese family was 2 weeks ago, Mr. Amuso. Both of these are very significant, but this kind of effort has to continue, and is continuing in this office, in my office, as well as federal offices around the country. I'll open up the questions if you have any. Thank you.
Do you have any plans to go after the people who were responsible for the destruction outside the courthouse?
That's being reviewed at the moment. It depends on whether or not there was any federal properties assaulted or any federal offices. Of course, we would prosecute. If it happened in the street, generally speaking, that'll be handled by the local police. I understand there were a number of police officers who are injured, and it's being reviewed at the moment. If there's any federal jurisdiction, yes, we will take it over.
The federal marshal's car, one car and two private cars belong to federal marshals were smashed, one and turned over.
Well, if it's a private property, it's questionable whether or not we'd have jurisdiction. If, in fact, it's a government vehicle, it's a different issue, yes. If we could find who did it, we certainly would prosecute.
Ms. Maloney, what kind of role do you think sentencing such as these and this sentence that applies to your plays in deterring reforms?
Oh, great deal. I think the most significant thing that's happened in the area of organized crime prosecutions and investigations in the last 18 months is the caliber of the informants that have come forward to the FBI. Salvatore Gravano was one example. Mr. Diarco, who testified in the Lucchese boss's trial. Peter Chiodo, a captain in the Lucchese family, and numerous others. But when people of that level come in, it encourages other lower echelon people to come in. And I think Jim Fox noted it the other day. There's some question in our mind that if any thinking up-and-coming crime leader wants to be boss of a family, have to think twice with these sentences. They don't vary for a second, it won't happen, but it's certainly having a chilling effect. Other than that, I wouldn't comment.
As far as the Gambino hierarchy goes, who's next?
We have a number of investigations pending in our office that will grow out of the so-called Gotti tapes. As recently as 2 weeks ago, the Moscas, which were mentioned prominently during the Gotti trial, have pled guilty as part of their gambling operation in Queens. There will be other prosecutions coming out of this Gotti investigation.
The consular motions were based on interviews with some of the jury members. Obviously, during the trial, it was a very important part of the trial for jurors to remain anonymous. Is there any investigation, or are you considering an investigation as to how those jurors came forward and what has been done with them since?
Not at this time. The only juror that I know that Mr. Kunstler spoke to was juror number 12. You people keep talking about 3 jurors. Only one of the 12 jurors has come forward on the defense side. Numerous other jurors have either written or contacted the judge with a contrary position.
Mr. Maloney, what do you think about what that juror had to say?
Which, number 12?
Yes, sir.
Well, I'd rather not speculate, but if Mr. Capisi's article in Daily News is correct, I think it's somewhat significant that 2 days after the conviction of this particular defendant, this particular jury contacts Bruce Cutler, who's all over the tapes of the Gotti tapes. I think that's somewhat significant. If that's accurate, I don't know if it is or not.
Why did you choose not to make a statement today?
It's my general view of prosecutions that not to get up and make long speeches about sentencing, and I think the facts of this case are sufficient to bring home what the case was about. The pre-sentence report was there. The guidelines were there. I didn't think it would add anything in particular.
If I could just clarify my previous question then, is there any thought of looking into how those jurors came to the media's attention? Or whether any pressure was put on them, intimidation, payoffs, anything?
You keep saying jurors, I keep saying juror.
Well, number 3. How it came to the media's attention.
Oh. No, we haven't got anything pending on that matter at the moment, no, sir. Yes, sir.
Mr. Maloney, you said that the trial was a reflection of the bigger-than-life size of John Gotti. What is seriously an attack on a federal courthouse by what appeared to be organized mob? What do you make of that in terms of respect for law, in terms of what's going on in America?
Well, I think obviously that little fracas in front of the courthouse was orchestrated by, I think, associates of Gotti, of course. But I think it's fueled by you people, that you made him somewhat of a folk hero, you made him somewhat of a Robin Hood. When I told you the day I indicted him, he wasn't any of those things, he was a murderer, and we proved that. And that message never seemed to get across to people. People still complain, how did John Gotti stay in jail for 16 months? We charged him with 5 murders. That practically makes him a serial murderer. Yet you people would write, poor John Gotti's in jail awaiting trial. You shoot somebody down the street, you'll be in jail, just 1, not 5.
Sure. I can't help but getting in on that excellent question. That was an orchestrated, planned event this morning. It was not a spontaneous demonstration of any sort. It was directed by the crew of John Gotti Jr. And we have identified many people who are active in that direction of that demonstration, of that disturbance this morning. If there's any honor among thieves, those mobsters who have some honor should disavow that action of the crew of John Gotti Jr. this morning. A disgrace.
Mr. Fox, do you plan to pursue an investigation toward possible indictment?
Mr. Maloney's office and my office will be discussing this at length.
You know, John Gotti Jr. was there?
We didn't see him. Mr. Fox?
Mr. Fox, there's been some concern expressed privately by law enforcement forces about what will happen on appeal. Do you have any concern about what will happen to your hard work when this comes to appeal?
That would really be Andy's question. I would say we're always concerned when there's appeal. We'll be watching it very carefully, but Andy, you'd be more in a position to.
I don't know of any significant issue for appeal in this particular case. Obviously, his lawyers will tell him otherwise, but we don't think so.
Mr. Fox, do you think, what was John Gotti Jr.'s motive for orchestrating this in this one?
Lord knows. What was he thinking of? I mean, you have new immigrants to the United States entering that courthouse every day for citizenship purposes, as they are in this building, and they see this type of a demonstration going on in the United States courthouse. What are they thinking? What was John Gotti Jr. thinking?
Why wasn't there more of a police presence? How did this happen?
We couldn't comment on that.
Andy, in retrospect, would you have done anything differently in that trial?
Not really. I can't think of anything. Can you, John?
He's dying to answer.
No. It would be hard to get a better verdict.
How was this Gotti reputation on the state? How was that difficult for you in investigating him in a longer way? What kind of problems did that cause?
Well, number one, if you follow the selection of the jury in this case, we had to go through almost 500 jurors to pick a panel. And during the course of that voir dire, which is in the public domain, some of you people covered it, a number of jurors expressed some concern about sitting in a case like this. We all had, I'm sure, friends talk about the danger of sitting a jury like this. Most of that is unfounded, but it creates that image, and it creates some difficulty both in getting cooperation from the public during the course of an investigation, as well as trying a person like that. The proof in this case, I think, was so overwhelming, we only had two concerns. Tampering, which has occurred before with this defendant on several occasions, and the possibility of fear.
Mr. Gleason, you were the focus of a number of personal verbal attacks in the courtroom, and certainly we know that you have been the focus of hostility from the mobsters who surround John Gotti. What was your thought during this meeting about that?
We all did, I think, a very good job of just worrying about what happened in the well of the courtroom. There was a lot of, outside the courtroom, there was a lot of criticism and intimidation. And even inside the well of the courtroom, all we cared about was presenting the case. We're used to this stuff. It's not, we've been around the block with John Gotti before. He is an abusive defendant. He is not dignified in any respect. This trial team cared not about what happened in the press, not about what was said in the hallway of the courtroom. All we cared about is presenting the proof. We cannot conceive of having presented the proof any differently or better. And we develop thick calluses when it comes to the abuse and the criticism. And it makes it easier for us to deal with the problems associated with the public perception of John Gotti. We don't care about that. We know that the people who know the proof in our case, who take the time to look at the evidence, know what the Gambino family is, know what John Gotti is. You've heard two extended statements by Frank LoCascio, the people in this room have. One was a long conversation where he talks with John Gotti about who's going to get killed, who's been killed, and why. They talk about killing DiBernardo and killing Louis Melito, and the fact that they have to kill Louis DeBono. That's the first one you heard. The second one you heard was today, where he says John Gotti's a wonderful guy and the world would be a better place with him. Now, you're close enough to what's happened and to the evidence to know what the Gambino family is about and what these defendants are about. The rest of the stuff doesn't bother us.
John, during the trial, you had made a comment when the chart was up that you're going to go after all the capos there. Is there any orders that maybe you're going to go at that, or should we work on that?
Well, some of the order is a matter of public record. The Moscas have already been convicted on their pleas of guilty. Joe Butch Correo has already been indicted. There are other indictments we made reference to during the trial that are still under seal. Stay tuned.
Any reaction to today's, I know it wasn't a big surprise to you, but any, I don't know, sense of relief or whatever at the result of your hard work, please?
It's the result of all of our hard work, and we're all very proud of our hard work and satisfied at the result we achieved.
Who do you think now is the capo di tutti i capi? After
I'll let Mr. Long answer that.
As far as we know, John Gotti's still running the Gambino family, and I'll let Jim Fox address it further.
What a guy, huh? I love this man. I think John Gotti will continue to try to run the Gambino family from jail. Now that the sentencing has occurred, I'm sure there will be movement within the Gambino family to take the reins of power from him. It may not occur until the appeal is returned, but like it or not, and I'm sure he doesn't like it, John Gotti is going to begin to feel people trying to take the reins of power from him. As to the structure in the New York mob in general, we aren't commenting on that at this point. You all know the Gambinos are by far the largest and most powerful, and perhaps the richest of the 5 New York families. So we'll have to sit back ourselves and see how this thing unwinds. Were any of your vehicles damaged today, by the way? Laura, was yours?
No.
I ride a bike.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, sure. They got killed again. They're looking to give us a little short change. They gave out some immunities at time they get those cases. That's right. I'm a MOBFAX. With Lewis and Mike. So Mike can't make it. Russell is dying. We'll make the main thing. So we jump on the phone and make that. Just like, because of that, just told Mike to take care of it. So I got to tell you, what's up with a boost? I want to see more than show, right? I was like, that. No, this is how we got this car. That's the reason why people make it. So they turn around and would take one to 10 given the immunity, Mr. Gotti, Mr. Remini, Mr. Correa. So they thought Bruce, because Bruce, what he was. They had a meeting. That is one of my the rule is the rule is What did I tell you? Jump over. Tell me exactly. Try to talk like I was. Try to. What did I tell you?
Whatever they gotta do, fight the case.
You tell how they fight it. Break their fucking holes like you mentally could, and don't worry about us going to jail. Me, number one. I like jail, but I like the streets. Do what I'm telling you. Don't ever have these kind of meetings again. That's what I got. Read.
That's what I'm saying,
That's all we do, though. Your job, I give two fucks about your job. I'll make it easy for you. The only one that knows how to answer you. You know why, Joey? Well, he should have sent you this stuff on being a qualified lawyer. He should have said, you know, Joey, you got a little fit for it. Think before you had a guarantee. Over there, this is almost a guarantee. I mean, this is what I get. So now, I thought he looked. So now when I say it, he jumps up. Jeez, I didn't think of that. So she's everybody. She's your fucking friend for it. You got a high pace for it. The Barato, whatever the fuck it's called. They beat for it. Louis, I swear my money. I got no love for money. Anybody that knows me knows that. I'll bet a game. I'll go play Cardinal and say, let's beat my father. I walk away laughing. I hate these motherfuckers. I hate them. No, you know I hate them. They don't give a fuck about shit. I'm sure you're dying. Next. Get the fuck out of the way. Next. Like, what do I got? Otherwise, they live on pocket. They live down in the house. And when he got in trouble, Jerry, I should see my mother alive. Mike was still practicing lawyer. They brought it to my house. Where is this? Breaking my balls. I just got in bed 2 hours ago. I said, don't worry about this. You're busy now. I told you, you're busy now. I'll be by the club in an hour and a half for how the saying is. You know, talk to a guy like you, talk to a brother. Don't worry about it. I'll fuzz you, you're good. We all know you're good. Boom, 2 guys took him out right away. Hey, show some compassion. Show some interest. Think about it before you talk. Go for a walk or something. Maybe you're in the fastest thing you ran away. Then come back. Listen, I ain't gonna map out no strategy. I want to talk to my client and my friend. These are my friends beside being my client. Let me talk to them. I ain't gonna write it down. Hey, they don't fucking, you can do this. Fuck you. I take it. At least I talk to them. Excuse me. I got nothing against it. Georgie's on the case alone. You're on the case by yourself. It's a malicious motive, drunken driving case within 60 days. You want to take a plea, right? Nothing like that. Take a plea. You got no right. Jeopardize that plea. Who the fuck is this? What is it? How are you? Bad for us. One of these kids here joint like this over here, they come in and keep shooting around. Yeah, so what you get one foot the fuck up here? Oh, God. Look, it don't make us look bad. It makes us look bad. You know what I mean? They were told to stay out of this joint. I just wanted to see if it was okay with you. But God, if they come forward, if they want to recall, we'll talk about it. Well, I'm listening. We know we got the option. Yeah, that would be okay. No motherfucking comes up. I want to forward. They let you do if they come forward. If they come forward, you insist that we stay in the hospital. Yeah, we got no message. We got to talk. I think I'd be looking around. I know that. What happened? Don't pay no mind to that. Listen to your brother, you're gonna be okay. Listen to your brother. Fucking angels came with paper, right? Stop, don't worry about it. Like that. It's nothing. These guys talk. Shorty, please, listen. Listen to your brother. I was in your room. I was in your room. You were going to sit, God forbid, hopefully you don't have to. But God forbid you're going to go sit, you're going to sit for 6-7 days. That's not a conviction. It's only a violation. The minute that case is over, not from the verdict is reached, the case is over. They say, we ready, Your Honor. Open the door yourself out, get the fuck out of here. You don't want to. If I like it there. Huh? If I like it there. Then you can say it. They asked you that first. Yeah, no, get the fuck out. He's telling you don't lie. You don't think people need to lie. What? You don't keep the people need to lie. No, you lie. You don't get you out of there. No, you lie. Well, you don't scream with it. Important work I'm doing. I ain't got the balls about the game, man, but I love this one Western against Purdue. I ain't got the balls about it. But God, it'll be the same thing. Yeah, but I ain't got the legs about it. So you did it, that's beautiful. I don't want to cover in that stuff. They never throw it away. What? They want to throw you in that body. So we cycle up. You know how it goes, you don't know. You came in with 10 days. Oh, yeah, you got it. You ready? Getting psychologically ready. What? That's it. That's like look at the trial. They're going to indict you, okay? You're right. They're not going to indict you. It's possible. Listen to me, please. I called every motherfucking step of the way. This is Mr. Mike Rose and fucking Jerry Cosell didn't call one thing right. I call everything right. This is a fraud. It's just a fraud. I told them that they're going to withdraw me. No, your name was a popular. I'm going to fuck with my ass. Some more. He didn't get this one. My father and I always were fine. First of all, I feel that they did it right. It's a year down the road. They didn't want to do it. But it's impossible. Impossible. Second of all, this is more important. They didn't even know. See, they said a researcher now. They didn't even know about the pitfall for Joe Bush. I haven't done that. You hope you'll understand. That's for sure. Good. I know. I just want to let you know in case it occurs. People are aware of it. That's the one who did my own. It's on the unit. Oh, wow. It's another world, Jackson. Yeah, but it'll be good. What I'm trying to say. That's a plenty truck. Yeah. What's wrong with 5,000 a week? 5,000. It's a federal case. They work 4 hours. You know, 4 days. So we can push. Yeah, the kids are. Yeah, sure. I'm going to kick it around more disagreements. I just want to make sure this guy's staying. You know, that's stuff here. He's the boss. 4 pounds, $35,000 shell out. I didn't really study it, I just looked it over. Yeah, there's nothing wrong. Who's going to handle the money, baby? They handle it anyhow. What the fuck's the difference? Who's going to handle it? It's being a family. Rich uncles. What can I do? I'll do Trump to the fucking force. That's what I'm saying. You know, I always think I like to do. I do it so hard. They do things that I tell me. Give it. It's easier. What's that? I know. I read the fucking thing is ridiculous. They got the extortion counts. They fucking it's got to do with him. They got a book, about 35,000. That's a shout out. They got to introduce right. The family wants to pick the poison. Yeah, but you got to give it up for that kind of stuff. That's a small town. Yeah, but still, they want the whole fucking thing. It's like a circus. I don't know. It's under control. Good. Whatever, whatever you want to do, whatever you're doing. I just want to put you up to date, that's all. I just want to put you up to date. Okay, I'll see. I'll take enough for you. When you see him, I give him my blessing. Okay. Let's try and get through this Christmas. Happiness and then we'll worry about it. I'm glad you're there with that Tony, but I just want to put you up to date, but that's where we are. I'm going to have dinner now. But Joe, finish it up and we'll take care of it. We'll keep them. Bush said that they put a fucking month or 2 months ago just a jury. Jerry Chardell said they got a piano. We said, "Why don't you get Jerry to come?"
How's like it was music on that stuff? I just get speed with the music. That was statue number.
He's supposed to be answering that. Joe Butch, did you have me come? Jerry Chardell's going to call him 12 o'clock and he's going to come and see me dinner. Was he downstairs? No, it's a date. Excuse me, a date. Yeah. Like 1898 or something. Yeah. But Jerry was going to be up from me anyway. His mother's probably 5 o'clock, 10 years old. I want to see if Joe was at the answer. I want to see it, but I can't say it's the mind. I want to see what they did. Listen to them. Jerry thinks it's a steam move. It's like a speedy move. Because he's here to get a fight up in why would this repeat it? This project. I never heard of it. You never heard of it. First time I ever heard of it, Jerry Chardell. He mentioned the Jerry Chardell. He mentioned the Jerry, the same half hour apart. And why would they give us another statue?
Another jury put it that he heard the rumor.
No. You see, it was told to the prosecutors. That's what Sammy, the people, and Gaspar. So now I told him, I said, this hypothetical situation happened with the guy. And that's when he accepted me. So I said, what about a guy like me? I said, you think you would have tried on me? And that's when he said, I worried that when we get to you, case of the center. That's what he did. Well, first when he told me the word, he was thinking of me. He was thinking of a guy in Boston. Or Buffalo, he was one of the two. For that fucking throws I wanted to strangle him. I know he laughs when he thinks it's bad news, this fucking Joe. No, George, it is. And he laughs, this motherfucker. Last night I said to him, you got more bad news?
You got news, right?
No, I got news. So I said, you got bad news? And they tell me a fucking rat. You know, but I said, oh, it's like, what, remember the old saying, the Greek guy killed the messenger? The messenger, the messenger.
How would you do this fucking message?
But otherwise you won't do it. Well, don't you remember when he told us a couple of weeks ago, don't worry about Sammy, true lying to his name, he's dead. Yeah, 2, 3 good. There's some truth to that, Sammy. These rats, they're not fucking jackrabbits. They're not jackrabbits. The way they always had information last like Woody Boy, they still got them. They're not stupid. You know. This is destruction. Get them. Happy Mason. At least you got not good, you know.
His son lives there for the best way of living.
Yeah, he's a fucking monster.
He really is.
No one to put
He
in.
says,
He is.
I respect this
Hey,
guy.
come on, Sam, go to the fucking bank. You know what you're saying? You see where you sort of stand? Then we got an accident out of here, right? So I got to go.
We got skippers on an accident like that.
Army client, this fucking guy, like Georgie, did 14 hours in jail. Fucking, you know. He got picked up. You got from town. You stand up for the fucking meeting.
Look at the way he's talking, all right. Got found guilty, and they go to the judge's chamber, he asks us to come here, and he can.
How about better than he says, I already know what I gotta do. What about me? I'm dead. That's all about this and that. It means you like Sam.
Yeah, you can see it was.
What I want to do is this. Wishful thinking you say honest. That's all it is, wishful thinking. Maybe things are going so crazy, who knows? But I don't think so. I don't that you're right. Who knows? Maybe say next door. Fuck,